Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. We've had the videos with me not buying any more orchids. Now we've got the videos of me not doing any more repotting. Well, I've been going through my notes and some things are due. And even though some things are due, they're not urgent. I've still got some stuff in original media from some of my new orchids that need sorting out, but that's, again, not urgent, not at the moment. But this one has signs of being urgent. It's a little Restrepia, scutulata, a present from Oliver, but the key word is some time ago. And signs. It aborted its bud. Now, it shouldn't really be blooming on a plant that size, but nonetheless, you know, anything that doesn't look quite right on an orchid, my first suspect is below ground. I always suspect below ground before I suspect anything above ground. And these are very fine-rooted plants in the main. Media smells incredibly earthy, I think's the expression. I wouldn't say it was broken down, but I would say it is on that path. Nonetheless, oh, pussycat. Nonetheless, it's on its way, but it's still got very nice little roots. A very fine root system on these. And see, I don't know what this was potted in, but there are lots of white dots all over the place. Now that could be mould. It's difficult to tell without getting a magnifying glass. It could just be the particles from the perlite that's in here and nothing to worry about. But nonetheless, it was due to be repotted, and so repotted it will be. That's a nice little root system. Nice little plant as well, and it has got a new growth, so it will be in the process of pushing out some new roots. Okay, I'll get this lot cleaned up and mix up some media and we'll get it potted. Right, just cleaned everything up. Get some mix done. Don't need a lot. I don't need that much. Basically, a few things. Restrepias, in particular, are not difficult orchids. Yeah? In fact, in my book, there is no such thing as a difficult orchid. The difficult bit is getting the environment right to look after it in, rather than the orchid itself. You know, I mean, they all happily grow where they grow. It's just us trying to replicate that or get somewhere near it. As far as Restrepias go, they're not difficult orchids, but again, the difficulty comes back to the environment you keep them in. They don't like heat, so they are effectively a cool grower. Some of them do grow in warmer places, but there's a proviso. They do like incredibly high humidity, and they are one of the orchids that can actually do well in upwards of 80% humidity. Now obviously in a home that's just not possible, all your curtains turn green. But you see what I mean, it's not the orchid that's difficult. They're very accommodating orchids and very attractive blooms, albeit on the small side. I was discussing with somebody once, I'll have to put a pop up or you won't know what I'm talking about because I haven't got a bloom to show you, but their blooms are quite spectacular. And we had a speaker at the Orchid Society that was going on about, you know, the changes in the world of orchids, the mimicry, you know, imitating insects to attract pollinators, and even mimicking plants that grow near them to attract the pollinators to the orchid instead of to the intended recipient of the pollinator. There's all sorts of devious things going on in the orchid world to make sure the pollination takes place. Some of it's fragrance, some of it's colours, some of its shapes and patterns actually mimicking the actual insect that it's trying to attract. There's all sorts going on. But the person went into, you know, the evolution and how things have evolved and what's called parallel evolution, the old Darwin orchid, you know, with the extremely long spur, and the prediction that there would be a moth because it's night scented, so it would attract night pollinators, of which there aren't that many. Moths up high on the list, and the prediction was that there was a moth somewhere with a tongue long enough to be able to get down this long spur. And then since those times there's been discussions about parallel evolution, whereby to guarantee the right pollinator turns up, the plant has actually grown a longer spur. And to actually be able to feed on the plant, the moth grew a longer tongue. Where does it end? 3 foot long tongue? But discussing Restrepia blooms, the patterning and the spots and stripes are like a landing pad. And in the sort of light spectrum that the pollinators can see, it sort of glows and guides them in. So that's one part of it. But then if you look at the 2 little antennae that stick out sideways, and nobody has yet come up with an answer to why they're there. And in evolutionary terms, they serve no purpose. Yeah? They don't replicate any insects that are known to pollinate those plants. So it's like an unknown as to how that plant has evolved to get those little antennae sticking out the side. And I did mention at the end of the talk, perhaps it's not finished yet. You know, I presume, you know, in evolutionary terms, when something gets to what it can conclude is near on perfection, it stops evolving. Hopefully we haven't reached that stage yet. We need some work to do. But I did sort of say, in terms of evolution on Restrepias, perhaps it's only halfway there, you know. Perhaps whatever was in mind, you know, natural selection, all the things that are involved, complicated subject, if you even believe in that sort of thing. But, you know, in evolutionary terms, perhaps those blooms haven't finished getting where they want to be yet. You know, just food for thought. Anyway, this is a fine-rooted plant. Therefore, the mix is nothing more than small bark and broken up sphagnum moss. Very, very fine roots on Restrepias. And going back to Restrepias, if you want to look after them, if you want to keep them, they are quite rewarding because they'll bloom on and off all the time. You don't have a season as such. So they'll bloom all through the winter, mine do, and all through the summer. The only problem with the summer is they don't like the heat. But if you can keep the airflow going, a good air movement around them and high humidity, they'll do well. But those are the prerequisites, quite honestly. It's as simple as that. They don't need a lot of food. They're down on the sort of Masdevallia scale for feed, so not very often and very low levels. They don't need a lot of food. You know, unlike some of our other orchids where you can stonk the old food up and they'll respond accordingly. You put too much feed near these delicate little roots and you'll burn them. So, you know, it's a very sort of simple process really. So as far as looking after Restrepias are concerned, if you can keep up high humidity, keep the heat down a bit, and keep the airflow going, they'll thrive. They're ideal for terrariums, simply because you've got a confined space where you can keep that humidity right up. They'll happily survive with a humidity of 95 to 100%, just below the condensation point, but they would need airflow or you'll get condensation on the leaves and you could cause some rot, so not ideal. But yeah, I mean, they're very accommodating little plants and they can grow into quite big plants. Because I've potted this, that's gone in small bark and broken up sphagnum moss. They do like to stay moist, they don't like to go dry. Most orchids with fine roots, you'll find, don't like to dry out. Those with the big fat chunky ones have evolved to take that moisture in when they get it and then hold it. Whereas with these, they need that constant supply, so they need to stay moist. During the winter, I let mine get almost dry, but I try not to get them totally dry unless it's just an accident and, you know, we've had some good weather and a bit of extra heat. And when it comes round to the time I think they need watering, it should have been the day before. But that's about as much, never more than a day. Apart from that, quite honestly, dead easy. But if you haven't got good humidity, they probably won't do well. And the signs of them not doing well are that the new growths come out and crinkle. You know the old concertina leaves on oncidium types and intergenerics? Some cotyledons get it as well. It's either lack of hydration at the roots, which can be one of two things: you're not giving it enough, or it hasn't got any roots or a poor root system, so it's not getting hydrated. And it's the same with the Restrepias. If they're not happy, they haven't got good humidity with some air movement, and they haven't got moisture at the roots, the new growths will crinkle. They distort and they don't look very pretty, but it doesn't mean the plant's going down, because it can recover from that. I repotted one of my larger ones earlier in the year, and it was one of those had to be done because the media was breaking down, so not a real choice. Unfortunately, that was in the warmer weather, so it responded by the roots not taking off that well, not being able to hydrate the plant sufficient to go with the heat, even though my humidity was high, and so I got some crinkled new growths. Well, they'll grow out. I don't mean the crinkled new growths will straighten up, that doesn't very often happen, but subsequent new growths are now growing fine. And then eventually, you know, I mean, these do eventually drop some leaves, like most orchids do. It's not like deciduous or anything, but, you know, older leaves do die off. So if you want to keep Restrepias, they are rewarding, mainly in shades of red, browns, there's some deep purple ones, some bright golds and yellows with red markings, quite an assortment of colours. There are some that are even white and red, so a variety. This is actually a species. This is an unusual one because what looks like the lip but isn't at the bottom where all the colours are, this one's actually split. Now those bright bits at the bottom where all the colour and the pattern is are actually fused together. There's two parts of the plant there fused into one, whereas on this one it's separate, so it's got like a V shape at the bottom. So there we go, quick and easy. Not much more to say about Restrepias really. They can often be found quite cheap, but you won't find them for sale in many places other than a nursery, because if you take them out of their high levels of humidity for any length of time, they can go downhill quite fast. So for normal sort of traders going to shows and things like that, especially a show that goes over, you know, a show that may take place over 2 or 3 days with the travel time either end and things like that, you could start your Restrepias going downhill quite fast. So you usually find these at nurseries where they can be kept in the right environment. Like Burnham's have got a vast selection of Restrepias, hybrid species, they've got a lot. But they don't travel well. I think that's the easiest way to say it. They don't travel well because they object to dry air. So there we go, quick repot. I've still got some more repotting to do, but it'll mainly be like this, one at a time, just now and again, unless I get an emergency, which I haven't got anything in that state at the moment that looks like it could get to an emergency before we get to the better weather and the longer days. I mean, we're down below 9 hours now, about 8 3/4, and by the end of the month we'll be down to, you know, not far off an 8-hour day. That's 2/3 of what what the plants really need in their natural environment. So, you know, I have to live with that, and things slow up as a consequence. But yeah, Restrepias are nice little plants, and ideal for terrariums, places where you can keep the humidity high but keep that air moving around them as well. Get some circulation around them with high humidity and try and keep the heat down, and they'll do well. And when they get going, they can actually grow at a phenomenal rate and put up new growths constantly, and then the blooms come from there. As far as the blooms go, they come from the base of the leaf, so they're a bit like pleurothalids, probably related in some shape or form. I'm not going to look that up. And some of them only ever have a single bloom, yeah, and others put a spike up with a bloom on, and then, you know, sort of a bit like a psychopsis, another bud will form and then another one, so you can get multiple blooms from the same leaf base, but some of them only one. So and that information is incredibly difficult to find unless you can see some pictures. Nobody wants to give up that sort of information. In fact, you don't find a lot of information on Restrepias anyway. They're not what you'd call one of your popular orchids, but if you can grow Masdevallias, you can grow Restrepias. Simple as that. And if you grow other pleurothalids, then again you can grow Restrepias. So that's that one done then. A quick one then. A little story. I should now be in a place about 30 miles away having a lovely, or getting ready to have a lovely roast dinner with some friends. Unfortunately my car won't start again. Grr. It's just intermittent, just comes and goes. I had a chat with the man, and I could hear his wife in the background saying, "You're not doing cars?" And he looked over his shoulder and he said, "No dear, I'm not doing cars," because apparently he's doing the kitchen up. So he deliberately left all his tools at work so that he can't get distracted by people like me saying, "Come and do my car, please." But yeah, I'm supposed to be having a nice Sunday lunch somewhere today, so I had to phone up and say, "Sorry, I can't make it, the car won't start." And I could hear the other half in the background going, "Yay, more for me." Greedy bugger. But he is the cook. If you cook it, you have the right to eat it in my book. Okay, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.